turn on my mic, did I? Okay. So, hey, great to be back. I'm trying to adjust here. I think I need to raise this up. So, a lot to talk about tonight. Get this adjusted. All right. Huh. Okay. Let's see. I don't know how I feel about that. Let's do this. Okay. All right. So awesome to be back with you again. Again, my name is Anna Nimitz. I'm here on Odyssey Hour. Basically, want to make this place a space where we can explore pretty much every topic of concern. And, you know, there are a lot of things that keep me up at night. And before I launch into the main topic of the night, which is identity, I want to do a quick recap of what we talked about last Friday. And at that time, I had posed the question, you know, what is it going to take for humanity to recognize itself as one entity, much less act, you know, harmoniously as one entity, but just to recognize the similarities that abound in humanity. I had an interesting response from that same question posted on my Facebook page, and that's from one of my Facebook friends, Amanda. And to that question, she basically stated, even the human body doesn't recognize itself as one entity. If one part of it is even slightly off, many other factors come into play, and the body begins to attack itself, partially because the part that is off is perceived as a threat to the whole. The human race is much the same, she says. They see something off and they begin to attack. Same reasons. She says they are perceived as a threat to the whole well-being. And the body doesn't have to really be off for this to happen. Neither does the human race. So she's basically getting at the idea that even as the body is disrupted by these attacks, you know, wrecking foreign elements and then going on the defense, it doesn't grind to a halt. And obviously we notice that about humanity, that it hasn't completely destroyed itself yet. You know, several thoughts came up in my mind after her response, one of them being that it reminded me of, you know, an organ transplant. When the body recognizes a foreign organ, it begins to attack itself. And we can see the parallels here in, you know, American society, especially right now. So I guess another question that pops up in my mind after that response was, is it even necessary at this time for humanity to then band together? Or is it okay to just trudge along as we always have been and continue on in this way? So a lot of interesting questions that came up from that. And also last week, had a great call in from Terami, who basically asked the question in response to my observation. She asked the question of, what can we do now? What is it that we can do now to, I'm going to have to look at my notes to put it as perfectly as she did. I want to do justice to her question. What do you see that people can start to do right now to participate in community and get out of that space where we are at odds with each other? And in summary, my response was that it's an inner focus that we should consider on, that it starts inside. That basically what we ultimately express out in the community has its origins in our inner nature, whether that's our thoughts or feelings or belief systems about the world. And I find that a lot of that line of thought is also related to the concept of identity that I wanted to explore with you guys tonight. And it's, I become very aware of the ironies of, expressing true identity, being dressed up in a costume and being completely detached from my primary ego. So, what comes up there is that inevitably the biases and attachments of my primary ego will come up even in my expression of this character. But this character, I take such pride in because she was formed out of wanting to challenge our ideas of identity. I talked a little bit before about the things that keep me up at night. I don't like to wake up, I don't think any of you do, to reports of yet another mass shooting or heightened terror alert, or just the variety of crimes that humanity enacts upon itself. And so that leads me to my next observation, which is how to put this. It really appears to me that it has become very easy for people to attack and destroy each other based off of the externals or reaction to our external nature. So we don't so much take the time anymore to really empathize or connect with another being before making a snap judgment or decision. And we're seeing this play out in so many ways with the Black Lives Matter movement, and the most recent development in that was the Terrence Crutcher incident. Another, hair trigger response out of fear, resulting in another life taken. So, those are the types of things that keep me up at night. Why is it so cyclical? Why can't we break free from it? I know when it happens that we get this sense of hopelessness, and on top of that, forgetfulness, because I think humans have this ability to habituate even to the most negative circumstances, whether it's being in a state of opposition to terrorists or racism. We get used to even the worst circumstances and accept it as our status quo. Sure, there's a lot of rebellion. We speak out, we tweet, we post about the injustices, the sheer horror, the fear of not being able to just be in the world and live out our lives. But then there's this forgetfulness, or maybe an almost hopeful, denial that it's a serious and persisting problem. So a lot of different angles to deal with the concept of identity. But to give you a little bit of background, and hi, if you're new to the show, welcome. My name is Anna Nimitz, and this is Odyssey Hour. We're talking about the concept of identity, and opinions are as unique as every single person that exists in this world. So I'm more interested really in hearing what you have to say about this topic and what you've experienced with, the formation of your own identity, how your identity has been challenged by the current events of our world. Anything you have to say, I'd love for you to call in and share with other people what your view is, because I know it's something that's on the minds of a lot of people. I was watching this amazing, I think it's a 6-part documentary that's available on YouTube. It's called Akasha. Careful, because if you just type in Akasha, it's just going to bring up Queen of the Damned stuff, which is cool too. But go ahead and make the search complete and type in Akasha Part 1, and it'll take you to this really in-depth look at consciousness and awareness, and all of the ways that our physical world interacts with our metaphysical world. And it's really an eye-opening look at some of the more subtle elements of human nature. And the interesting thing about the subtle aspects of our lives, like the thoughts that no one can read because they're swimming around in our minds, and just our general awareness. The interesting thing about that subtlety is that it almost appears that humans intuitively know that there's this invisible force guiding our expression as we go along. And I really wanted to give that subtlety and that invisibility expression through this show. I think it's so important to look behind the veil and become conscious of things that are really actors in the larger scheme of things. Sometimes we don't pick up on those subtleties until we acknowledge them and give them a voice. So sorry, I'm trying to adjust this. Back to identity. I'd like to tell you about the origin of me, Anna Nimitz. Anna Nimitz is actually a play on the word anonymous. So I had this idea back in 2015, and it's something that was kind of subconscious and came back to play with me every once in a while, maybe since before that time, since before the fall of 2015. And it had its origins in just wanting to transcend this feeling of hopelessness that we can be tempted into from seeing all these really pervasive, systemic limits that we seem to have in our earth, on our earth, that prevent us from rising above what we know we're capable of. So, I think part of human nature is just the potential that is there to be tapped, and I have this stubborn refusal to believe that we can't do better than this. So I thought, what better way than to um, kind of embody a sort of uh, unbiased, neutral character that really, I mean, you could judge me. You could judge how maybe ridiculous my outfit looks, or how I pause too long when I talk, or you can judge me on any number of externals, but to create a character where the focus becomes tuned toward the inner substance of someone. So, uh, an entity that's not very easily dismissible. And I love that idea because, read any article and scroll down to the comments, and you'll see no limit to the attacks and just this urge to tear down others who are just, coming from a different viewpoint than you. So, getting fed up with that, really. Getting fed up with um, people thinking that they're better than each other. I mean, where does this idea really come from? I mean, um, humans are born, they live a life, and then they die. Where do we adopt that continuum of I'm better than you? It all seems like you know that humans are subject to the same laws of physics. So where does that idea come from? It's just a social construct, right? So um, my primary ego is naturally a very detached person. Uh, when when she feels her emotions, she doesn't feel them on the heart level so much. Most of the time, it's more of a mental acknowledgement of, hey, I should be sad right now, or I think the only emotion strongly is anger right away. So that's one emotion that just kind of overrides her senses. She doesn't feel sad a lot. So and that's one thing to acknowledge about identities in general, is that we're not all the same. You know, it's not a one size fits all type of world. So why do we have this expectation that our experiences should lead us to the same sets of feelings or beliefs and thoughts? That's just not the way that things play out. So this character really has a lot of layers for me. I love the idea of anonymity. Um, you know, look into your own life and you'll see maybe a few players that are um, behind the scenes types of characters. Maybe um, a supporting actor or a character foil who works day in and day out to give some sort of support to you. And it's possible that nobody else in your social circle really knows the depth of your connection with this person who is such a source of strength or power for you, but you know their name, you know their identity, you know what they are to you. There's so much power, I think, in anonymity, as much power as there is in celebrity. And I know that's a strange thing to say um, in this day and age, because uh, we would all love to be celebrities. I think if we really were real with everyone and admitted it, everybody wants to be acknowledged and known on this journey of life. So I love Anna Nimitz. I love this character because she is basically a manifestation of a lot of my thoughts, a collection of my thoughts regarding a range of subjects, and how what's the connection there? I think just looking at the shootings of unarmed Black men again, they're reduced now, as we know, to a hashtag eventually, and then that same forgetfulness overtakes us about the raw pain and anguish that all those who are connected to that person are feeling right now. So in essence, there's this flash of acknowledgement. There's this blaze of really unintended glory in knowing who this person was at the worst moment of their family members' lives. And then there's this period where we forget, and although we fight and we struggle in the meantime, it happens again. I mean, look at the language of the phrase Black Lives Matter, and all of the rebuttals to that, all lives matter and blue lives matter. Look at that last word, matter. Again, to me, the bells go off. Hey, that's a desire for acknowledgement, to have someone see you exactly as you are, not just that, but to value you for being what you are. Basic human acknowledgement. So that's just one of the things that kind of plays around in my mind. And it's so easy, I think, for us to get hung up on the externals, how we look. Do we talk with an accent? What kind of accent? Are we from the South? Are we from the Northeast? Do I sound like a Valley girl? It's easy to get hung up on, I guess, what we perceive with our five senses. And if we really stopped and thought about it, our identity is formed in part due to all the experiences that we accumulate through our five senses, the majority of the time. So these are the kinds of thoughts that I get caught up in. One other thing I wanted to express really was, all the other factors that go into the formation of my own identity, one of them is that I have a deep love of learning. I'm an informationaholic just as much as everyone else seems to be right now. I can't get enough. And um oh, and I have to apologize ahead of time for this. I should have apologized at the very beginning for this, but I tend to go off on different tangents. But the reason I mentioned that 6-part Akasha series was that it had this pretty startling statistic on there, of course, which I don't remember now, but it basically said that the amount of data that we are exposed to in this day and age is um, unprecedented. It's staggering and it's overwhelming how much information we really take in on a daily basis. The way that we operate has changed because of how much information that we're exposed to. I can speak for myself when I say I'm I'm hooked to it from the moment I wake up until I convince myself to finally put it down and fall asleep. uh, I want to know more and more, and I know a lot of you share this hunger. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here on this platform. You just want to be as well informed and aware and in the know as possible. And when I heard that statistic, which my mind can grasp for it, but it was like not terabyte, but some kind of byte level of data that just I had not heard before. And obviously, that's the way things are right now, is that we're so hooked in to a virtual world of information that perhaps we've become disengaged from our actual physical reality. Uh, there's so much on the internet that speaks to that we just need to talk to each other, directly to each other, instead of staring at our phones, and we need to unplug. And it's true, we we would we would really benefit, I think, from the perspective of um, optimizing being in our inner worlds, to unplug from the vast amount of opinions and um, I gotta say, misinformation and um, just emotionally charged energy that's flying at us. There's so many memes, albeit inspiring us. There's so many memes that are telling us how to be and how to be better, which is great. And I think it's great to be hungry for being better. That's probably why I'm so hooked to it, because what is human nature but to not want to be, wait, hold on. I think I got my double negatives confused. But what is human nature but striving toward being the best that we can be, right? Um, but this information storm that we get caught up in, it's detrimental too, I think, to our identity. I think it's important to acknowledge the ways that it's really cutting into our progress as a race. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on um, anything I've said so far, um, because I really think that a lot of things are connected to the formation of our identity. So the first one I identified really was that um, what we learn, what we learn from watching others and seeing them live out their lives. This probably comes up with the idea of birth order. I like to joke as a firstborn that, yeah, of course, the secondborns and thirdborns and fourthborns are gonna do things, run a tighter ship maybe because they've seen the firstborn screw everything up and make all the mistakes. And that's one way that we learn is just by observing each other, and that really forms our responses and our behaviors. We either learn from it and do the opposite, or because we might admire that person, um, take our chances and go the same road. But so much complexity to identity, right? I could think about it all night, and I could talk about it, I guess, in this convoluted, winding way for a long time too. But I'd rather hear your thoughts. And so I'll post that as a question on my Facebook page. Thanks for all the likes so far and the follows. I appreciate that. But I'll pose that question of surrounding identity. And I guess another factor that plays into identity is really our attachment to what we see playing out before our eyes. All the opinions that we're assaulted with. How do we orient ourselves to that? Do we become attached to it? Do we take that as an assault to our very identity, and do we engage from that place of fear and reactivity? Or are we going to take the time to unplug, reflect a little bit, think a little bit more critically, and then approach the situation? I think in a lot of ways, as a culture, and I'm speaking specifically to American culture right now, we've lost that ability, or we're losing that ability to distance our own core identities from the opinions of other people, and then really do some evaluation before we respond. So, and that's just my opinion. It could just be my truth, but so attachment. In my experience, I think, and because I'm naturally detached from other people's opinions, or I'm not a people pleaser, so I don't know what it's like to come from that perspective. That would definitely change how we talk to each other, if we're out to prove a certain point to someone. So attachment, I think the Buddha said that attachment is the root of all suffering, and I can definitely see some truth in that idea. Whether it's trivial situations or our love lives, the depth of our attachment is, I think, strongly correlated with the depth of our pain when we lose that attachment. So, my primary ego is pretty blessed to be so attached. But I want to hear from you, any of you who come from the opposite end of that spectrum, those of you who really, align yourself with, let's take politics, for example, whether you align yourself very strongly with the right or the left. I want to hear your thoughts on identity. I think it's such an interesting concept to observe. I'm kind of treading lightly on the topic of the election, just because I don't want my natural biases and leanings to show through. Only because I don't care to influence in that way. I don't, like I said, I'm detached from it. So So I guess you could say I'm afraid of going down that road. It's so interesting because even taking on an alter ego, uh, there's this crossover from, the fears that my primary ego has about the public and about how I will be perceived. You know, I think that stems from how I see all of you attacking each other. It's damn scary. It's not something entered into lightly. That kind of forum, the world stage where everyone has an opinion and everyone really has so much power to put their any thought into action. I mean, look at me. I was approached. I wasn't approached. I approached BidChat back in June because my primary ego was actually going through a situation that really challenged her identity, and that situation was that her place of work. There was a shakeup. There was a buyout where management really there's a change. There's a change in management where uh, the underlings were felt to be left out of all the benefits of this change. So really, some of the big dogs at the top are the only ones who benefited from this, and there's a lot of resentment. People were quitting left and right, and um, she made the decision. She, my primary ego, made the decision to job search. Look for life coaching positions that could be done in a telecommuting type of way to basically escape. And I think that idea of escape is one that I'd like to talk about further in the future. It's just as important a topic, I think, as what we get addicted to, like information and other things. But yeah, she wanted to escape that that set of chains that held her, hostage to the rat race and to the oppression of people who could basically just terminate her at any time and not really blink an eye over it when really that's her main source of income. She did not like feeling that way. She did not like feeling that she was dispensable. That doesn't make her feel like she matters. So, her most creative instincts were inspired, and over one of her lunch hours, she wrote an email to BidChat. I think this was one of the first work opportunities where I didn't send my resume in. I wrote probably the funniest thing I've ever written, and I express myself a lot better in writing. But so sending that email over a lunch break, and it was just magical to receive a response saying, "Hey, we want to interview you over Skype." That to me was really just confirmation that when you are at your lowest point, you feel desperate and fearful, and people have made you to feel that way. People have, and I don't like to say that because I think that we are responsible for how we feel, but you're made to feel, or you come to feel that people are against you, and they can easily just end whatever relationship they have with you and not really care. um, when you come to feel that way, I know that when she came to feel that way, she implored the universe and implored God to ask, um, if you can help me create an opportunity to just transcend this day in, day out rat race. um, I'm willing to do what I've never done before to make that happen. um, she's noticed that her most intense desires, when expressed that way and followed by, you know, surrender, are really answered in the most profound ways. And I view bid chat as one of those opportunities. The manifestation of, you know, one of my greatest desires is to forge my own identity. I can't tell you how good it feels to have a secret identity. It's pretty damn awesome. Uh, and ironically, it after the shakeup, after all of that, you know, discord at work, um, and in preparation for, you know, presenting myself on this stage, I've I have been able to transcend a lot of different feelings, uncomfortable feelings. I mean, she, she has transcended so much. I mean, it wasn't as if she was bad at her job. She's actually pretty damn good at it, and um, she it's almost like she does it in her sleep now because there's so much joy at being able to express through this platform. It's like, um, and I don't mean to condone escape or, you know, deception or any of those negative things, because I'm all about the positive. But um, one thing you got to understand about her is that everything's a social experiment to her. um, she just loves to play and play with reality. And, you know, a lot of her beliefs are, you know, more aligned with the law of attraction and, you know, increasing consciousness and thereby, you know, gaining more control over your physical world. So I think it's fair, or it's only fair to kind of disclose that um, she has a more, I guess, Eastern orientation. But it's just a whole other layer of her understanding her own identity, really coming home and feeling home. Um, it's this feeling that no matter what happens, it's all going to be okay. That there's always this possibility, this impulse to be able to just create your own way. And that's another thing about that I love about this character, is that um, it's original to be someone, to be on a Nimitz, but to be anonymous, to be unknown at the same time. There's so much liberation in it. And I know that throughout the decades or the centuries, uh, there have been people who use anonymity with malicious intent. I mean, we see it now with ISIS, and um, you know, from everything I've learned about serial killers, they thrive on their ability to blend in, you know, to the general populace and go unnoticed. And so I have to address that in some way. That I'm proud of this character and I'm proud of my primary ego because her intentions are pure, and she's a helper at heart. And uh, even as this idea of anonymous was unfolding, you know, within her consciousness, she was going to school um, on top of her job to get trained as a life coach. Um, and so I have so much strength, love, and respect for myself. Um, And I know that to some people that might sound egotistical, but really there's a large movement among life coaches to be proponents of that idea that um, self-love is so important. To truly love yourself is paramount to being able to actually give quality love to other people. And just to kind of tie that to biblical scripture, actually, I believe. I mean, it's been a while since I read a Bible, but I believe one of the scriptures, and I'm going to paraphrase, sorry, God. One of the scriptures points to loving thy neighbor as thyself. How can you do that if you don't love yourself? How can you give something you don't have? So, that layer that makes up our emotional makeup is so important to kind of explore, to really test the quality of our makeup, our emotions and our thoughts and our belief systems. What is the quality of those things? I mean, anyone can have those things, everyone does, I hope. Some sense of self enumerated in your thinking and all of your beliefs, but what's the quality of it? For me, I something that really resonates with me is, and I don't, of course, remember the exact name, but I'll post it on my Facebook page when I do remember. It's a Hawaiian principle. There's 7 principles of Huna, and one of them states that effectiveness is the measure of truth. So, is the way that we think and feel and act, is it effective? I think one thing that's moved me along in my spiritual journey is understanding that if I am not, providing value to somebody's life, if I'm not affecting someone or impacting someone in a positive way, then for me, there's no use for the relationship anymore. I told you, I'm very detached, so I tend to view relationships in that way too. That you can teach me, and I'm the type of person who thinks that everyone is a teacher. I get something out of everyone that I come across. If we're not teaching each other something, what's the point? That's the effectiveness piece for me. Is there something happening here? Is there a point to all of this? And I love exploring our world from that viewpoint. What's the point of generations of human beings, taking pride in all of these various identities and successes and triumphs and all of that if we're kind of stalling, we're not moving forward together. So I've reached the point where I've gotten sick of hearing myself talk. It doesn't happen often, but I'd love for you to call in, because I know that there are people out there that are way more interesting than me and way more funny and way more intelligent and articulate and just real. And I can't wait to get to know as many of you as possible. That's my mission here, as this entity, is to expand my identity. I mean, the first step was creating the look, creating the set, haphazardly creating material to present. I think you'll notice about me that I'm pretty much all over the place, and I like to be in the flow of ideas rather than having a list to go down. But If I can recall that I started a list during this episode, it would include learning, attachment. What else influences my identity? Um, the desire to be free, the desire to be empowered, to empower other people. Um, as we get back into our discussion of politics later on, when I'm a little bit more courageous to pursue it, I think you'll see, well, the reality is that, my primary ego is most aligned with whoever is interested in serving others out of love. Um, she's least aligned with people who uh, speak and act out of a place of fear. In my experience, fear does nothing to help build connections, and fear does very little to strengthen your inner self or your inner sense of being grounded in yourself. If you've ever watched Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's one of my favorite teachers, he does a demonstration where he basically interacts with someone from the audience and has them hold up their arm and think about a thought of seeking revenge or wanting to punish someone for something that they did to them, and he applies pressure to that person's arm, and they very easily lose their ability to resist his movement. So, and then he has them think about a thought that is very empowering and just strengthens them, and he finds that he's very hard pressed to make their arm budge when he pushes down. Yeah, it's a pretty cool little video if you want to YouTube that. But that's Dr. Wayne Dyer demonstrating the power that we have with the strength and the quality of our thoughts. So I think I forgot what I was talking about. See, this is why I need callers to kind of remind me, get me back on track. But oh yeah, aligning ourselves. What do we want to align ourselves with? Do we want to be creatures of fear? I think this is the perfect spot in my brain to do a plug for Friday Night Frights, which I'm missing out watching right now. That's hosted by Gray Dolan, and who doesn't love ghost stories? I love ghost stories. But thankfully, BidChat platform allows us to archive our broadcasts, and so I can watch that later. But she's awesome. She's a comedian, and she takes you to all these haunted places, and she's great because she has an engaged audience already telling their ghost stories. So I can't wait to see that installment. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, fear. Who wants to be someone who in their everyday life acts out of fear? And it's such a weak emotion. It's such a weakening emotion. I hope all of you know how empowering an emotion love is. It's, to me, the source of all creativity. Procreation kind of benefits from that emotion quite a bit. Whatever quality it is, but love, I want to be aligned with love, and I don't, I wouldn't taint this image by departing from that commitment. I don't want even my anonymity to be associated with fear. Yeah, I mean, I'll work on the costume a little bit. I know it's kind of creepy, but other than that, I mean, come on. So I've talked a lot about different facets of identity, um, and that, you know, a lot of those facets originate from inside. Um, you know, I'll do some soul searching to see how I can communicate development of that detachment. You know, I think it's a naturally occurring thing in me, but I did talk about a few episodes ago how I I'm an introvert, right? So I noticed one thing about myself this year is that because I'm so quiet most of the time, that's almost like a natural meditative state for me. I do think a lot, but I can also get into this place where I'm an observer of a lot of those thoughts, and I challenge those thoughts a lot. So that I think is pretty nourishing to a detached spirit, is to disengage from identifying with your thoughts so much, like identifying strongly with your thoughts. Um, so I guess there's a lot about my primary ego that also gels with my alter ego, just non-attachment mainly. But oh, it's 9 o'clock. Okay. It looks like we've reached the end of our time together. All right. Always a pleasure. Um, and I look forward to meeting you, to hearing your thoughts. You know, I hear my thoughts all day long, all night long. Honestly, insomniac here. But I can't wait for you to find expression on this show, because that's where the magic is really going to happen. That's what I anticipate. And so check me out next Friday night at 8 o'clock. um, I'd love to talk about positivity. I think that's such an important topic, but would love even more to continue this discussion about identity with you. So look me up on Facebook, Anna Nimitz, or tweet at me at No Limits Nimitz. Uh, have a good night. Have a great weekend, guys. Much love. How you do that sign language thing? Much love, humans. Bye bye.